Hello, Pre-Calc Honors kids. This is Miss LaFour, and I am going to go over graphing sine and cosine with you today. The graphs of sine and cosine, they look like waves. Oh, wow, this thing is bigger than I thought it was going to be. I'll have to fix my thing here. And they're called sinusoids. And if you recall from our unit circle, notice we got our unit circle right here. We already know what sine and cosine values are for each of these quadrant things. So notice we're looking at the quadrants. We're starting here, and then we're using the point for this one, and this one, and then this one, and then back to where we started again. So cosine at 0, remember cosine is your x, so we're using that ordered pair right there on our unit circle. Cosine is 1 right there. Up here, we're using this ordered pair. Cosine is 0 at pi over 2, using this one. Cosine is -1 here, and down here at 3 pi over 2, cosine is 0. And then back at 2 pi, cosine is 1. Sine is the y values, so again, using those same ordered pairs. At 0, it's 0. Pi over 2 would be 1. Pi would be 0. 3 pi over 2 would be -1, and 2 pi would be 0 again. So notice that on these, they go from 1 to -1 and stop at 0 in between, okay? They just have the same pattern, and these would repeat over and over and over again. So if we look at this as a graph, stretched out, not on our circle, this is what the graphs will look like, okay? Our parent function graphs. So notice on cosine, we are starting at 0, 1. So I'm going to label this one as 1, and this one as 2, this as -1, this at -2. If you ever are graphing something on a graph and they don't give you the values and you choose something other than 1, for your intervals, make sure you note that on the graph, like mark what it is. Okay, so I'm starting here at 1. Pi over 2 would be 0. Pi would be -1. 3 pi over 2 is 0. 2 pi is back at 1. So this is one cycle, or one period. Notice how these are curves. They're not straight lines. It's like a curve up and a curve down. So this part actually completes one cycle. Now I could continue on because it does go on forever and ever, right? It keeps going here and mimics this same thing, up, down, up, down. But from 0 to 2 pi is one cycle. It's like one trip around the circle, basically. For sine, it starts at 0, 0. Again, I'm going to label these. Okay, this is 1, this is 2, -1, -2. Okay, so we're starting at 0. Then we go to 1, back to 0, -1, back to 0. So this one's a little easier to see, a cycle or a period, because you're going one up, one down. So I kind of like it a little bit better because you're starting, and then once you do a hump and a hump, you're done. Whereas cosine, it's a little bit harder to see because you're starting at the top and then you're ending at the top. It starts over again at that point. But it still is one up and one down. It's just the ones on the top, the two pieces, are separated. All right, so those are our parent functions. They all kind of look like that. We're going to make some adjustments to it, okay? So notice here we have our standard equations. Most of the time they do use theta here, but you can see it as f of x, okay? A cosine b x, or same thing over there. So just know that the x here just represents a variable. It is not the x of, say, x is cosine. It's not the same thing, okay? So don't get that confused. If you want to put theta, fine, put theta. I use both, so, and they have other variables too that they put in there. Now the amplitude is the absolute value of the number that's right in front of the trig function. Whether it's sine or cosine, doesn't matter. That value right there tells us the amplitude, and that's common on the ACT. They ask that a lot. if they ask you that, make sure you always give the positive of it, even if it's a negative in the equation. Okay, so it does mean something in the equation as far as negative goes. It helps us with graphing, which we're going to do in just a minute. But it's an easy question to get right on the ACT. So if they ask you the amplitude, you just look at it, write the absolute value of it. And what it means is it's the distance from the midline. So if you notice, and I'm just change color here, like you see here, our midline on this one, on the sine one up here, is at the x-axis. So the amplitude here is 1 because it's going up 1, down 1. And of course, there's nothing here, so we know there's a 1 in front of our equation. So that's our parent function. But if there were 2, we would have went up 2, down 2 kind of thing. All right, so our period, one cycle, is always going to be 2 pi divided by b. Because normally if b is 1, it's 2 pi. So, you know, one complete circle. But sometimes there's a value in front of the theta or the x, which means, you know, we have to deal with that, and that adjusts our cycle, how far it is to complete one full cycle. And then a frequency is not really used for graphing purposes, but it is used in word problems. It's just the reciprocal of the period. It's just the number of cycles that the graph completes. It's kind of like rate of change here. Rate of change. Okay, so that just comes up in the word problem. So we're really not going to do anything with it today except for look at how to find it. That other part will come in at a later date, something for you to look forward to. All right, so in this one, we are actually going to graph some of these. So the first one is pretty straightforward. Notice we can tell right there our amplitude is 3, so awesome. Period is going to be 2 pi divided by b, and in this case, our b is 2, so that is just pi. And our frequency is the reciprocal of that, so it's 1 over pi. Easy enough. Now we're going to take this and graph it. So if we know there's no up and down, which we're going to get to in a minute, so we know we're having our x-axis as the midline, and sine starts at 0. So I'm going to put a point at 0. Then this period of pi means the whole cycle is done between 0 and pi. So I'm going to put another dot right there because that's where basically it's going to start over. So when I remember what a sine looks like, remember sine was like 1 up and 1 down hump. They started here, and then once it got back to the same spot over here after doing an up and down, it was complete. So that's what it's going to look like in between here. So I know exactly in the middle between the two endpoints there is another intercept. Then in between each one, I'm going up 3. So like this one, the first batch, I'm going up 3. So 1, 2, 3, put a point there. In between that one, it's going down 1, 2, 3, 3 from the midline. All right, so now we have drawn our first cycle here, okay? So that's one period, one cycle. Now, when you take the test, and every time in the homework, it's going to say, fill out the rest of, complete the table all the way across. So I'm going to just do this in a different color. And all we got to do is keep going, like follow the pattern, okay? We already went an up, a down. So now we go back to an up. All right, there's my up, and then I got a down. So I just mimic it over and over. Try to make these curves. I know it's kind of hard. Okay, so now I'm backing it up. So I'm going like this. I know it's hard. Mine kind of looks kind of straight. Maybe yours will look better. But I'm not going to butcher you on grades because your lines aren't perfect. Okay, so don't worry about that. We're just trying to get the sketch here. Make sure your points, though, are in the right place because that's hugely important. But if your drawing's not perfect, it's okay. I'm not an artist either. All right, so that would be what you would do to graph this one. Now notice on this next one, this one's a little bit more complicated. Our amplitude here is 2. We still want to put a positive 2, even though that's a negative. Okay, we're going to deal with the negative, but amplitude is always absolute value of it. It just tells you how far up and down. It doesn't tell you direction. All right, so period, let's see, that's 2 pi divided by b, and in this case, b is 1/2. Oh my goodness, you remember how to do that? Okay, 2 pi times the reciprocal, so then that means our period is 4 pi. So that means our frequency is 1 over 4 pi. Alrighty, what makes it harder is this right here, because it's 4 pi, and we don't have 4 pi on our graph. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but we can do this, all right? Let's see, cosine starts usually at 1, but on this one, because the amplitude is 2, or actually, since it's -2 right there, that's where we're going to start, okay? We're going to start at the -2 for cosine. So let's go here at -2, so it's 2 down from our midline, and I'm going to put a point, okay? That's where we're going to start. So at 4 pi is where we would do it again. So notice here, if I'm starting at the bottom for cosine, it's going to be a half up and a half down, right? Till we start, this would be a complete cycle when it's negative, okay? We're starting at the bottom, so we would have to go up and then go up to this one, that one, and it's 5 points, always 5 points there to make a cycle. So we know at 4 pi is where this one would be. However, I don't have this on my graph, but I do have 2 pi. So I know halfway through is 2 pi, so that's going to be this point here. So it needs to be 2 above, which means that 0 right there is right in the middle of that, so that would be at pi. So now I can connect these, okay? It's a curve, right? This one's really stretched out, and then I have to mimic it on the other side. Now granted, this is only half a period because we're not going all the way to 4 pi, but we need to keep it going on this side, so halfway through, halfway the other way, right? So here we go. We got the other piece. We got to connect it. You got to keep that pattern going. So that really looks weird, but there you have it. It's there. Okay. Alrighty, so we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so amplitude. Oh, look, I still have that on there. My bad. Okay, amplitude is 2. Kind of gave that away, right? It's the one right there. Let's see, our period would be 2 pi divided by a half again. Ouch, that's always hard. Remember, this is 4 pi. So you either can remember that or learn how to do it mathematically. Period would then be 1 over 4 pi. Okay, so what's different about this one? You see that +1 right there? That means we are sliding this whole thing up 1. Okay, so our midline is changing. So our midline now is going to be at, let's see, our midline is going to be at 1. So here we go. I'm going to just draw a dotted line here at 1, positive 1 all the way across. So it's like taking our axis thing and just pulling it up right there. So let's see, then we can go to graph it. Okay, so this is sine. Sine starts at 0. Well, normally I'd start at 0 because this is our new midline. That's basically our 0, okay? That's our 0. So we start here. The period is 4 pi. Oh, man. That means if I have, remember, sine goes an up and a down like this, right? Unless, of course, your A part was negative, then you need to flip it. But at 4 pi, I'd be at the end. But I don't have a 4 pi on my graph, so really I'm only graphing the middle. So I need to do 2 pi right here. So that means 2 pi is going to be another 0. So halfway in the middle is going to be my max, so up to from the midline. And I'm going to go ahead and draw that. Voila, there we go. Oh gosh, that looks like a line. Let me see if I can fix it. There we go. Maybe can make it a little bit better. Sometimes these are hard to draw on these iPads. It's not great, but it's fine. Okay, so then if I back it up, then since I have an up, the next one would be a down. So halfway through is the min, and then back up to the 0. There we go. Now we're done. Alrighty, so on the next one, this one is not written in the proper order. See this 3 in the front? You got 3 minus 4 cosine 2x. This really is the part that should be first. We should put this plus 3 at the back. Okay, you can't combine that 3 and 4 because they're not like terms. Okay, this one's got a whole chunk with it. That's a chunk. That's one term altogether. It is negative with the 4, cosine 2x. So this plus 3 normally is at the back. They're putting in the front just to confuse us. But that part is just meaning we're going to bring the whole thing up 3. Okay, so that's just shifting it up. So our amplitude here is 4, even though it's a negative. Just be careful with that. We're going to look at the negative part in a minute. Period is 2 pi divided by b. B here is 2. So that means our period is pi. And frequency would be 1 over pi. Alrighty, so now let's see. Draw our midline up 3. So I'm going to change color here. Up 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so here we go. Alrighty. So we have our midline. Cosine starts at the A. Our A here is negative 4. So then negative 4. So 4 down from that midline. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. Okay, I want to go back to black. I got the wrong color here. All right, let's see. Go back to black. So there we go. Alrighty, then we have at pi is the end of the cycle. So remember cosine, since it's negative, we got the down part first. Well, I say down. It's the one below the zeros. Okay, min, 0, max, 0, back to min. Okay, so we're starting at a min, and at pi, we end at another min. So, okay, so that would be here, which means the middle between the two is your max. So in between these two, I got to go 4 above. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Let's see, in between that is our zeros, which means that's when our midline is, right? Okay, so now we just draw it. There we go, look at that. So you just need to make sure you know which one starts where, cosine or sine. All right, now we got to continue this pattern over, and I'm going to go on with a different color here. Okay, so we're just going to follow this same pattern. So I know there's a point here. I know there's a point all the way up here, and then halfway is our zeros. So there we go. Keep drawing. So not terrible, but it does take a little bit to get used to. So if you got to follow the pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Up, down. Just continue the pattern. Oops, that one was in the wrong spot, but whatever. Okay, here we go. Now we go up, curve, 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 curve. And this one should go here. Ignore that dot right there. Here, let me erase it. That shouldn't be there. Alrighty. So now we get to do some a little bit easier things. I think it's a little bit easier because you're not actually graphing. We're just going to use the information they gave us to write the equation. Now, they're telling us right here which one to use, okay? It says the sine function, so we got to use sine. We can't use cosine. Sometimes they let us choose which one we want to do, but this one they're telling us, okay? So our amplitude is 5, so I know I have y equal 5. I know I got to use sine. The period, let's see, the period right here, see, I know is normally 2 pi divided by b. And the period here is 4 pi. So in this case, I've got to solve for b. So you can just cross multiply if you want. Some of you can see what this is, but that means I'd have 4 pi b equal 2 pi, right? I'm multiplying by b on both sides. Divide by 4 pi, so 2 pi divided by 4 pi. So b is 1/2. Okay, so then I'm going to go back over here. I know we have 1/2, and I can put theta, or I can put x. It doesn't matter, your choice. And then the vertical shift down just means -4. So not terrible. All right, so the second one here, we have amplitude of 3, so y equal 3. And of course, we know it's sine because they told us. Period is 2/3. Alrighty, let's see. So that means 2 pi over b would have to equal 2/3. OMG. Okay, so we got this. I'm going to cross multiply and solve right here. That gives me 2b equal to 6 pi. Divide by 2, and I get 3 pi. Alrighty, so that means this is going to be 3 pi x, or theta, if you want to put that. And then vertical shift up 1, so plus 1. Alrighty. Now the next one we have is they're giving us a cosine function, and it's nice that they told us what it is. Okay, cosine function. And then we're going to write the equation of this. So we got to use the graph to pick it out. So I'm wanting you to see that if I'm starting for cosine, if I'm looking at cosine, I know I started a max or a min. This one is starting at a max, and then it's going down and then back up, and it ends back at the next max. So really, I'm only looking at this portion of the graph, okay? So that's one cycle, and that's really all I need, okay? This is one period right here. That's all I need to figure it out. Oops, okay. All right, so I know here I got to find the midline. Midline, let's see, how far up is this? Okay, from a top to a bottom, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it's 6 total, so half of that is 3. So that means this is our midline, okay? Right in the middle. That means I'm going up 3 and I'm going down 3. So that means that my amplitude is 3. So now, and since it's starting on the positive side, okay, on the positive side of this midline, I know it's a positive 3. That goes there first, okay? Cosine, let's see, the period normally is 2 pi divided by b, and b here is pi, because that's where it finishes. You see how it goes from 0 to pi? All right, so that means b would have to be 2, okay? So I'll put a 2 here, and of course x, or theta, and you could do parentheses here if you want, it's not a big deal. And then, let's see, are we going, no, we went down 1, so minus 1. There we go. We have figured out the equation for this one. All right, so now you should be off and running to get the work done, and enjoy.